Look at this painting carefully. Take a few seconds. Two men, both richly dressed, standing on either side of a table covered with objects. What do you see? If you said two powerful men surrounded by expensive things, you are correct. If you said a painting full of symbols about knowledge, science, and diplomacy, you are also correct. But if that is all you see, then you are missing the single most important thing in this entire image, and it has been hiding in plain sight for almost 500 years. It is not subtle, it is enormous, and once you see it, you will not be able to look at this painting the same way again. The painting is called The Ambassadors. It was completed in 1533 by the German-born artist Hans Holbein the Younger, and it currently hangs in the National Gallery in London. On the surface, it is a portrait. Beneath the surface, it is one of the most carefully constructed arguments about mortality ever committed to canvas. Who these men were. The two figures in the painting have been identified with certainty. The man on the left is Jean de Dentville, a 29-year-old French diplomat who was serving as ambassador to the court of Henry VIII of England. The man on the right is Georges de Selve, the Bishop of Lavore, who was 25 years old at the time and visiting London as a personal favor to his friend. Both men were young, educated, well-connected, and acutely aware of the political turbulence surrounding them. The year is 1533. Henry VIII is in the process of breaking with the Catholic Church in order to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and Mary Anne Boleyn. Europe is fracturing along religious lines. The Protestant Reformation is reshaping everything: theology, politics, the relationship between kings and popes, the structure of power itself. Dentville and de Selve were Catholic men working in a world that was coming apart at its foundations, and Holbein, who was himself working at the English court under Henry VIII's patronage, understood exactly what it meant to stand in that room, in those clothes, at that moment in history. Hans Holbein the Younger was by 1533 already one of the most sought-after portraitists in Europe. He had been born in Augsburg around 1497, trained initially under his father, also a skilled painter, and had established his reputation through a combination of technical precision and an almost unsettling ability to capture the psychology of his subjects. He had worked for Erasmus, painted Thomas More, and upon arriving in England in the late 1520s, had quickly secured access to the highest levels of the English court. His portraits do not flatter in the conventional sense. They observe. There is a coolness to them, a forensic quality, as though Holbein is recording rather than celebrating. The Ambassadors is the largest and most complex work he ever produced. What the objects are telling you. The table between the two men is covered with objects arranged on two shelves, and not one of them is there by accident. Every single item was chosen to communicate something specific. On the upper shelf sit instruments of the heavens: a celestial globe, a portable sundial, a quadrant, a torquetum, devices used for measuring time and navigating by the stars. These are the tools of astronomy and cosmology, the science of understanding the universe and humanity's place within it. They represent the outermost scale of human knowledge, the attempt to comprehend what exists beyond the earth. On the lower shelf, the focus shifts to earthly knowledge. There is a terrestrial globe, a book of arithmetic, a case of flutes, and a lute. The lute has one string broken. That detail is deliberate. In the symbolic language of the 16th century, a broken string on a musical instrument represented dissonance, disruption, something that should be in harmony but is not. Given the religious schism tearing through Europe at that precise moment, the broken lute string is not a minor observation. It is a comment on the entire world these men inhabit. The arithmetic book is open to a specific page, and the Lutheran hymnal, partially visible on the lower shelf, has also been identified. These are not neutral objects placed for decoration. Holbein constructed this shelf as a kind of argument. Here is everything human beings can know: the cosmos, the earth, music, numbers, faith, and even at the height of that knowledge, something is broken. There is one more object on the lower shelf that almost every viewer overlooks. In the upper left corner of the painting, barely visible behind the green curtain, is a small silver crucifix. It is easy to miss. It is, in some ways, the quietest thing in the image, but it is also, given everything that was happening in 1533, possibly the most politically loaded object on the entire canvas. The thing you have not seen yet. Now look at the floor. More specifically, look at the diagonal smear across the lower portion of the painting, the pale, elongated, vaguely oval shape that cuts across the tiled floor between the two men. Most viewers seeing it for the first time assume it is a flaw in the reproduction, or perhaps some kind of decorative element they do not recognize. It is a skull. Not just any skull, but a skull rendered using a technique called anamorphosis, a deliberate optical distortion that makes an object unrecognizable from a straight-on viewing angle. If you stand directly in front of the ambassadors, the shape is meaningless. But if you position yourself to the far right of the painting and look at it from an extreme angle, or, in the original installation context, if you pass through a doorway to the right of where the painting hung, the distorted shape snaps into perfect, three-dimensional focus. A human skull, painted with extraordinary precision, floating between the feet of two of the most powerful young men in Europe. Holbein did not invent anamorphosis. The technique had existed in various forms since at least the early 15th century, but no painter before or after him ever deployed it in quite this way, at quite this scale, in quite this context. The skull in the ambassadors measures roughly the same width as the entire lower portion of the canvas. It is not a small hidden detail. It is a central element of the composition that has been encoded to be invisible under normal conditions. The question is, why? What Holbein was really saying. The tradition Holbein was drawing from has a name, memento mori. It is a Latin phrase meaning, remember that you will die, and it describes an entire category of artistic and philosophical practice in which symbols of mortality are embedded into images of wealth, beauty, and power. A skull beside a vase of flowers, a wilting petal among the fresh ones, an hourglass on the desk of a scholar. The message is always the same. None of this lasts, but Holbein takes this tradition and does something that no one had done with it before. He does not place the skull beside the men or on the table among their instruments. He places it beneath them, distorted almost to invisibility, requiring a completely different physical perspective to perceive. The skull is not part of their world. It exists on a different plane, one that only becomes visible when you step out of the position of the direct, admiring viewer. When you stop looking at power the way power wants to be looked at. Jean de Dinteville, who commissioned the painting, had a personal motto. It was a single word in French: memento, remember. Some scholars believe this is not a coincidence, that the skull was included at Dinteville's own request as a meditation on his own mortality during what was, by any measure, a deeply anxious period of his life. He was young, prominent, living at a foreign court in political crisis, surrounded by the highest levels of power, and yet he wanted, hidden in his own portrait, a reminder that all of it was temporary. What I find remarkable is the precision with which Holbein solved the problem he had set himself. The skull had to be large enough to be legible from an angle, but distorted enough to be invisible from the front. It had to be placed on the floor without disrupting the balance of the composition. And it had to coexist with everything else in the painting without announcing itself. Look at how much is happening in this image. Two figures, a table full of meticulously rendered scientific instruments, elaborate clothing, a detailed tiled floor, and somewhere inside all of that, invisible unless you know where to stand, is the whole point. That is not a painter showing off. That is a painter who believed, with complete seriousness, that art could hold more than one truth at the same time, that an image could be a portrait and a political document and a meditation on death all at once, and that the deepest truth of all would only reveal itself to the viewer who was willing to change their angle. 500 years later, that still feels like an argument worth making. I'd love to know, did you spot the skull before I revealed it, or did it completely escape you? Let me know in the comments. And if you know of any other paintings hiding something this significant in plain sight, I'd love to hear about them.